Hi, and welcome back to my channel. It is so good to be alive today. Just such a great day to be alive. It's a Sunday, March 15th. I wanted to, just get on YouTube and just let everyone know that I spoke earlier, about a week ago, about the number three. And there's another number that I want to talk about that is very important also. And that is the number 13. A lot of people look at the number 13 and see it as a very negative number. And especially like we just had last weekend, we had a Friday the 13th. And a lot of people really see that as a very negative number and a very negative day. But I'm here to let you know that Friday the 13th is a very positive day. The number 13 is a very positive number. And just had a couple of stories. Of course, I'd like to take my stories to begin with from the Bible. And so I just want to talk about King David in the Bible when he was anointed to become king of Israel. Samuel the prophet anointed him as a young shepherd's boy. And from the time he was anointed until he became king was about a 13-year period. So it took him about 13 years to become king once he was anointed by the prophet Samuel. And so we see there that number 13 is very positive. Also, Joseph. Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers. He was sold, ended up as a slave in Egypt, and ended up in jail. He was accused of advances to Potiphar's wife. Potiphar was the man he was working for, and he was accused of advances towards Potiphar's wife, and therefore thrown into jail. Now, from the time he got to jail until he became second in command to the Pharaoh, it took him about 13 years. The whole time he was a slave in Egypt, he was in prison and going through a tough time in his life. And after about 13 years, he became second in power in the whole country of Egypt. Now, that is just a couple of stories of how the number 13 can be looked at as positive. One more story I'd like to talk about is when the Israelites were going towards the promised land. As they were going towards the promised land, they came upon this area called Jericho. Jericho was built, like we know the story, with a wall around it, and no one could get into Jericho. But that was part of the promised land that God had promised Israel. And so God told Joshua to have the people and himself march around the wall of Jericho one time a day for the first 6 days, and on the seventh day, march around the wall 7 times. That is marching around the wall 13 times in total. So after they got to the 13th time that they marched around the wall came down, and the Israelites were able to enter into Jericho and conquer that land. And I'd like to talk about a small personal story for myself. Many, many years ago, I attended a church. This particular church I was attending, I was a member of, and so forth. And I remember my second daughter was just born. And one Sunday morning, we were getting ready to go to Sunday school, and so forth. But my daughter was an infant, and I was moving kind of slow that morning, trying to get things done, but not really in a rush, not in a hurry, just getting it done at my leisure. And I had, this is my second daughter, so my wife and my older daughter, they were getting ready for church, and they were done much before me. And so, when they got downstairs, I was so far behind in getting ready for church that I told them, I said, just go ahead and go without me. I'll continue getting the baby ready, and we'll come behind you. And after they left, I kind of just looked around and I said, you know what, I'm so far behind. I haven't even fixed the baby a bottle yet. I need to change diapers and, so forth. Just do the regular things you do with your child. And so I decided I just won't go to church. I'll stay home with my child and then enjoy the Sunday morning. And so I fixed the bottle, had her changed, she was cleaned up, and I'm outside sitting on my patio and just enjoying the Sunday morning with my daughter. She's a very small infant, and she used to take a long time to drink a bottle. And so I'm feeding her the bottle, and we're outside and we're enjoying the nice breeze and just enjoying the beautiful weather, and the birds are singing, and the geese are in the pond, and the flowers are blooming, and just everything is so wonderful, and we're just enjoying ourselves. And as we're enjoying ourselves, um, I just remember feeling just the peace of God and His surroundings all around us, and we're just having just a wonderful time, just a beautiful morning, and we're just bonding together, and the weather was warm, the breeze was beautiful, and just having such a great time, feeling the Spirit of God all around us. The Spirit of God was just all around us as we were out there. And she's just an infant, so she just enjoying herself, enjoying cuddling in my arms and drinking that bottle. And after about 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes, she was done with the bottle. And we decided to go in. And we went inside and just enjoyed ourselves together. And, continued on with our day. Continued on with the week and continued on with life. And several years later, and I must say it was about 13 years later, that church that we were attending had some uproar that was going on inside the church, and certain people were leaving, and there was, people taking sides and so forth. And I'm not into all of that, I'm not into all the drama. And so my wife and my now at this time I had 3 daughters, and they all decided to go to a church out of town, and I decided to stay home that Sunday. And I stayed home, and I went outside, started taking it easy, just relaxing on the patio, and I felt just a peace. And the wind started blowing nice. It was warm. It was about the same time of year, maybe May or so, and it was just warm outside and just beautiful, and the birds were singing, and the geese were in the pond, and everything was beautiful. And as I'm sitting there just enjoying myself and feeling the Spirit of God all around me, God spoke to me and said, I have missed spending time with you like this. And that touched my soul, really touched my heart. And so that was about 13 years after the first time I sat out there with my daughter as she was an infant and enjoyed the Spirit of God moving through the air on the outside of my house. I felt the same exact presence of God again. And that kind of changed the direction of the way I lived my life. That day was almost a new beginning for me. It was a new beginning. I changed my personal relationship with God to a whole different level at that point. I became a real person who really knew. I became the person I really knew. I really knew that my relationship with God was just father, son. Father, son. And you can have a relationship with God that way also. You know, father, son, or father, daughter. You know, just knowing that you are an actual child of God. And that is the day that I kind of felt like everything changed for me, where I wasn't just a person going to church every Sunday, following a religious belief, and enjoying fellowship with other people. I began to know that I was an actual son of God. I am not the son of God, the Christ, but I am a son of God. And that was 13 years after the first time I sat out there and felt the Spirit. That was about 13 years later. So the number 13 is very positive for me, and it is positive for you, and it should be positive for everyone on the planet. Now, I've got one more story to tell you about the number 13, just to show you how important it is. Now, we all know that Jesus has had 12 disciples. And so we know from Peter, who was the first disciple, all the way down to the last, he had 12 disciples. And Jesus and his disciples would go many places all over the world, all over the earth, and in the Middle East, and perform miracles. Now, people would see the 12 disciples coming, and they would recognize the 12 disciples, and they would know that something good is about to happen when they saw the 12 disciples of Jesus coming through town. But there was one more person, the person that made up number 13, the 13th person in that whole group was Jesus. Jesus is the 13th person in the whole group. He had 12 disciples, and he made number 13 in the group. And Jesus died for our sins. It was a Friday when the Roman soldiers decided to crucify Jesus. A Friday. And he's the 13th person that you see when you see the 12 disciples. Jesus is the 13th person that you will see. So on a Friday, the Roman soldiers decided to crucify number 13. So don't be afraid of Friday the 13th. We have had already this year in 2026 two Friday the 13th. We had February and March, and I think we have another one later on in the year. I'm not sure what month it is, but there will be another Friday the 13th later on this year. Do not be afraid, and do not worry about the number 13, or even if it lands on the 13th, on a Friday. If it lands on a Friday, do not be afraid of a Friday the 13th. It is okay. Your life is wonderful, and God is always with you, and He will make sure that you are always taken care of. I hope that this has been a positive word to you. I hope that you will like and subscribe to my channel, and that you will share this video with a friend. And I hope to give you many more messages in the future, in the very near future. Thank you. Just remember, Friday the 13th is a good day. 13 is a very positive number. The Roman soldiers crucified Jesus on a Friday, and he was the 13th person who you will see after you saw the 12 disciples. Thank you. Have a wonderful Sunday and a beautiful rest of the week.